on abortion and feeling guilty about having an abortion, firstly, that feeling is justified. Don't invalidate yourself. Don't gaslight yourself. We live in a society that makes you feel guilty for what you've done. We live in a society that makes it a point to say what you've done is wrong. So those emotions are valid, but you do not have to trap yourself in those feelings and not let your life move on because society says abortion is wrong.
Good day, viewers. Hope you're well. My name is Yanda Sondlo, and welcome to this segment of my podcast, which is Intentional Parenting. In this segment, I speak all things parenting, building generational good parenting, healthy style. So, my guest for today is Hau. She's an abortion activist. She's a journalist by profession. She's a mom of 2 boys and an overall content creator. Welcome, my sister.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So get straight into it. Why are you so controversial? Why do you think you're so controversial?
So I think it's because I talk about things that people don't want to talk about. I think it's because the truth is sometimes something that we have gotten accustomed to hiding, especially in Black communities. Runa, we grow up with our parents not telling us a lot of things and not wanting the truth from us. So we get accustomed to not speaking about things. And then when we do, or when someone does it, then we call them controversial. But my topics are challenging because I prefer to talk about the root of issues rather than the surface level symptoms of something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about your upbringing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I am from the Northwest, ke Motswana. I'm from Rustenburg. I was raised by my grandmother, my father's mother. I never got to experience being raised by my mother because of the divorce and whatever happened between the two of them. So for the most part of my life, I didn't know my mother. I was raised by my grandmother and my aunts, which is my father's sisters. I went to boarding school very young. Like grade 1, I was in boarding school. When I think back now, when my kid was in grade 1, I was like, my family was brave. My grandmother died when I was 13. She got a stroke and my aunt had to take over. My father was one of those people who relate who comes in Christmas and then leaves. He has the longest holiday in Christmas and then he comes. So I started getting to know my mom when I was like 14, 15, a little bit older. We don't have a very good relationship because whatever happened between her and my dad, it felt like she's taking it out on me, sort of. But apart from that, I think my upbringing was okay in terms of how my grandmother raised me. I think my aunt was pretty abusive. And that is something that I only got to admit and realize when I'm older. But I had fun times with my brother. So I grew up with my brother, who is actually, I always explain this because it's funny, he's actually my nephew. He's supposed to be calling me aunt. But because he's older than me, they raised us like brother and sister. But his mother and I are actually cousins. But she was way older than me, and she had a baby like when she was quite young. So my brother's like, 5-6 years older than me. So I had a good time with my brother growing up. My childhood was a lot of boarding school, a lot of away from home, stuff like that. It was a touch and go. I think I changed 6 schools in my life. Yeah, we were going there and there and there.
So do you think the content that you do has a lot to do with your background?
Yes.
Okay.
I think the content that I do specifically with regards to conscious parenting and how we raise children has a lot to do with my experience of being a child. Having started feeling depression as a teenager, not knowing that it was depression, but going through the symptoms that I now look back on and I'm like, now that I know better, that was a depressed child. Having attempted to try suicide when I was in high school, that was a troubled child. So I think a lot of that is what has inspired my parenting style, first of all, and me deciding to share with other parents. Yeah.
So did your parents ever know that you tried to unalive yourself? What did they think of it also? Because our parents are very old-fashioned.
Yeah. So my dad, not so much, but my cousin that I spoke about, who is my brother's mother, who raised us like we are both her kids. She was almost like she played the role of my mom in the later stages of my life, which is around matric, and we stayed with her. So I spoke to her about it. Her reaction was hurt. She felt like she was doing everything she can, and she felt like I'm selfish. She didn't address it as like something is wrong. Let's take care of it. She was more like, why would you do this to me? And a little bit of me gets it, because as much as she was a nurse, I don't think at the time she understood mental health as much as she should. I mean, even in the sector, people do, say really horrible things to people who are depressed and stuff. So she was more like, wow, why? Why would you do that to me? What more am I not doing? Yeah.
Why do you think that generation see mental health illness or their children being mentally ill as a failure on their parenting, like if their script has failed? Because I remember when my mom passed on, I found out that I had ADHD and depression, and my aunts were like, get over it, how, So why do you think they see it as a failure on their parenting script? Because they've had this script for many generations.
Yeah. I think it's several things, but I think I'll touch on two. I think one, it's lack of information. So I think a lot of Black people were denied the right to understand certain things, even with regards to parenting, which we'll obviously get into later. But I think lack of information is number one. Our parents were not exposed to the truth. Our parents didn't know what was happening, or, there were Black people, there was apartheid, there was whatever, and they were pushed away from knowing and understanding what is happening and getting that information. Even small information like what medication to give your child, they had to make plans because of their condition. But I think number two, it's because we make we expect our kids to, how do I put it, we look so much to our own parenting as an influence on our children, and we don't see our children as people on their own. So we project so much of my efforts, what I'm doing on the child. So we see our children or our children's actions as a reflection of our parenting. And I think that's a toxic way of looking at parenting, and it puts pressure on you as a parent, a lot of pressure. So our parents were putting pressure on themselves a lot to say, if Zianda does this, it's my fault. Every single action your child makes or whatever happens to your child cannot be cannot be put on you. Not everything. Some for sure, but not everything.
Oh, yeah. So what is conscious parenting to you? You said you want to put it as conscious parenting. What is conscious parenting to you as a modern day mom?
Yeah. So conscious parenting to me is, I like to illustrate. So children are usually smaller than us, and before they become adults, some will grow taller than us. But I usually use an illustration, and I say, conscious parenting is the child is here, you're here, you come down here in order to understand the child, so that you know how to raise them better. But a lot of the times, traditional parenting sits there, and the child is there, and there becomes a veil instead of a connection. So I always say conscious parenting is also connection over authority. It's putting a relationship and not doing parenting, but remembering that you have a relationship with your child. You're not just doing a task. It's not a job you're just doing. It's prioritizing a connection and connecting with your child at a human level and understanding why they behave the way in which they behave. But more so, it's understanding why you react the way you react towards your children and what influences your choices when you parent. What is it that says to Zianda, no phones? Don't touch your phones. It doesn't mean it's good or bad. The question is, what inspired that choice that you made? Is it your upbringing? What inspires the choice to say when a child did something, you beat them? What made you decide that? You need to sit down and think for yourself. What is it? That's what conscious parenting. It's a lot of self-work. It's a lot of asking yourself, why do I make the choices that I make as a parent, and who do they benefit? Do they benefit me, or do they benefit my child? Do you know what I mean? Like there's always an action results in consequences. What is it that I do, and what does it, I guess, what is the result of it? So it's a lot of asking yourself a lot of questions. When your child triggers you, I don't know, people get triggered. I get triggered a lot. Like my son will say something or will do something, or I'll say, do this. And they're like, no, or they don't want to do it. And immediately I'm triggered like, what? Who do you think you are? Like, wait, what?
The children will test your kids.
Yes. And I'm like, and then conscious parenting says, instead of reacting immediately towards that, ask yourself why you feel that way and what you can do about it to get a better result instead of just reacting. Because what we do is we feel entitled to just reacting because they are children.
Yeah. Why do you think we hold that emotion so much of consequence? Like, I want to teach you a lesson.
Yeah.
Why do you think we can't let it go? Because I've seen in most of your videos, they like, a child will never say that to me, and you tell me to gentle parent.
Yeah. I think it's because one, fear. It's been instilled in us by a traditional parenting that, if you don't do certain things, your child will be spoiled, disrespectful. So we are afraid. We do not want children who will be disrespectful, lack manners, which is okay. We want good values. We want our children to have manners. We want our children to be able to be around other people and life is good. We don't want our children to always be the troublemakers. So it's one, fear-based. We are afraid. That's number one. But number two, we've been given this, I always call it a God complex. We think everything we say is right and the kids are always wrong. There was once a time, and this term is used a lot, where they said children are not to be heard, they are to be seen. So they are here, but we don't listen to them, they listen to us. So we have this God complex that says you're the authority, you need to be in control. So we also want to control, because when we lose control, everything will mess up. You want to be in control, you have to gain control. You have to be in control to make sure that the behavior is different or it changes or it goes in your way. And really, sometimes we're just tired and we are exhausted. It's been a long day. Just go to sleep. Like, honestly, why do I have to debate with you about going to bed? Why do I have to fight with you about eating? Sometimes parents are exhausted because we have so many responsibilities. And the quickest way to make children listen to us and hear us is to be like, hey, either beat them, shout at them, or threaten them. That it's quick. It makes them react quickly. It's not the whole job of like speaking, understanding, getting to know your child. That feels like too much work. So we're tired, we're lazy. So the easiest way to do it is we are. Yeah. Because we're tired. Come from work, or we work. People think being a stay-at-home mom means you're relaxing all day. Yeah, you just relax. You're doing so much. Making sure the upkeep of the house is proper. And when you have small children, especially, there's just so much to do. There's laundry, there's making sure they are fed, there's the house, there's so much work to do, especially for moms, because moms are the ones who relate with their kids more. So if there's a quicker way to get your child to hear you, people resort to that.
Africans are results-based people. Like, we think this script, my mom tutored me this way, this is how I am raising my kids. My grandmother raised me this way, and I'm married, I've got kids. Why do you think we place so much on results? Like, if you didn't get married on time, there's something that your mom didn't teach you. And especially it falls on the moms. Like, if you backchat to adults, you stand up for yourself, it is because your mom, there's something that is wrong in your parenting, because the results are not what society wants.
So I think we live in a society where we've created these unsaid rules that are like, this is how life has to be. Like, you're supposed to be born, go to school, go to university or college, get a job, get married, have your own kids, maybe make money. If it's a lot, then yay. And that's how your life is supposed to be. And when we experience the reality that life doesn't actually operate like that things happen. I mean, especially because we're Black people, we should know that a lot of us, we are in the circumstances that we are not because of the choices we've made, but because of how society is structured, because of inequality, because of what apartheid did. And people like saying you blame apartheid. The point is, it was going on for so years. It has resulted in a lot of us not being able to achieve what we need to achieve. But we put so much pressure on ourselves and our children to say, but what's wrong with you? Why are you not achieving? And parents compare a lot, which is one other thing that I've found to be really problematic. So if it's like a competition. And if parenting is a competition, for a lot of Black people, it feels that way, because our mothers most of the time will say, but Zianda's doing this. Why are you not doing that? What's wrong with you? Zianda's behaving this way.
Yes.
Why are you not behaving that way? And I think we make parenting and motherhood a competition. And when you do that, you're putting so much pressure on yourself, even as the parent, which doesn't work. But I also think mothers are blamed a lot because of patriarchy, the fact that mothers are the ones who normally do the child raising, because our history made sure that fathers are the ones who go to work. And mothers are the ones who sit at home and raise their kids. That's why we find ourselves in a situation where most women are the ones raising kids, which is why most women are the ones beating their children. Most women are the ones having toxic relationships with their children. And I don't know if you've seen on social media now, more and more people are talking about their toxic and complicated relationship with their mothers, which is something that we never used to do before, because you used to be told that your mother's everything to you. Your mother, but also at the same time, we don't look at the circumstances that led the mother. Being responsible and being everything for children is really difficult.
That's
being
true.
a single mother is really difficult. And when society doesn't create support for mothers, it doesn't create safety nets for mothers, you just end up so tired. You just end up so depressed yourself. A lot of our mothers were depressed and didn't want to admit that they were depressed. A lot of the beatings we were getting, people had bipolar and they didn't know because they didn't get tested. I do not believe that my aunt, the way in which she raised us was normal. I believe there was something mental health related. Now that I'm older, I'm like, she might have not been diagnosed, but there is no way you can be toxic to that extent and it's not clinical. Like, it's not to give her an excuse, but it's to say at the same time, we need to acknowledge that mothers need support. And if we don't support mothers, then we're not going to get the results that we want of healthy children.
What you said is true, that there's so many posts about the mother wound, like toxic motherhood. Because I remember, like I said, when my mom passed on, I was diagnosed with depression and ADHD. And now it made sense why I had the sleeping patterns I had and why they didn't understand me. And as time goes on, I saw the patterns I saw. This is the same way my mom behaved, and she was in denial that there's anything wrong. And there's that other thing as Christian, that kimoyo mobi, something is wrong. There's an influence, So why do you think the mother wound is so controversial? Because your mom is supposed to be everything, like they said. I remember when I came out to my aunt about some of the things that I thought my mom was toxic, they were like, oh, ungrateful, because she's not here. Why are you saying that? I'm saying I forgive her. She also had her things. She was a widow. It's gone, but it is there. There is mental health, and it's real.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Because, I'll make an example for you of my experience, right? So growing up, I always knew and I could see, it was never said to me, but observing my environment, it was clear that mothers are so important, but I didn't have mine. So it made me wonder what's wrong with me? Why is my mother not sacrificing herself for me? Everybody else's mother is like, your mom. For me, when I then started questioning this whole thing, and then when I became a mother myself, I look at the amount of pressure put by society on you as a mother. The inhumane way. It's almost as if the minute you have children, your identity falls away and your kids become your identity. That's the other thing I wanted to say earlier when I said mothers also look at children as their trophies. Because what else are you living for?
That's true.
You are giving your children as a responsibility, and motherhood has been made your personality. Kuri, that's who you are. Because the minute women get pregnant, the minute you give birth to a child, that's what society feels is what your purpose is in life. This is what you are here for, right? So we remove the humanity of mothers. We remove the complexity of being a person. We are people, And when I found out my mother's story and I learned more, it didn't I didn't invalidate my own pain. I still acknowledged that my mother hurt me in her absence. And even when I was around her, she still hurt me because of whatever she was going through. But also it made me think about how, we remove so much humanity from mothers. And it made me think about how my mother probably resented me. And how many mothers out there are resenting their children and don't want to talk about it. And when we don't talk about it, we don't solve it. We don't support through it. There was a time where I resented my son, and I didn't know I was resenting him until I realized one day that, oh my gosh, I actually resent this child. I feel like he blocked my life. I feel like he stopped my life. And those are Those are feelings I
Those are
had. It doesn't mean it's
exactly.
true. My child didn't stop my life. I chose to have him. But the minute I didn't have him alone, right? But the minute he came, I had to take responsibility by myself. And society is almost okay with the fact that the fathers
Their life can move on.
they can move on, right? Where now you're stuck with the child because all decisions were made by me. Everything. I remember being in public transport once, rushing home and just like crying because I realized that I will actually not have nappies this month. And no matter how many messages at the time, when he was still not around, he's back in our lives, he's been back in our lives for a long time now, but no matter how many messages I used to send to him, he wouldn't respond. I just broke down in a taxi. And I remember this lady saying, what's wrong? You know, people didn't know what was going on in the taxi, but I was just so tired. And every time I would get home, it wasn't like a, hey, baby. It was almost like a, man, you are annoying me. Like, I wish you were not here. You know, and those are postpartum depression feelings. Those are feelings of being overwhelmed. And mothers are afraid to talk about it because they feel like they will be judged because they feel that way.
Exactly.
Right? Also because there's no safe spaces for mothers to talk about it. Because the reaction is going to be, what kind of mother are you? Even from your own mother. I've had women who've said, I think I'm having postpartum depression. The baby was born maybe 2-3 months ago. I tried to talk to my mother about it, and the first thing my mother said was, how could you? What kind of mother you are? Because why would you feel that way? But in actual fact, mothers need safe spaces to talk about this issue so they can heal, so that they can find a tribe, so that they can find support, because raising children is so much work. It's so much emotional, financial, psychological. For us, it's even our bodies. Our bodies change. It takes a toll on our bodies. I will never be the same again. Like, my body will never be back to what it was. It is what it is now, and I have to accept it. So mothers are afraid to talk. There's just so much pressure on mothers. I mean, I remember when I started the Black Women Healing Garden, which was a space for mothers to have these conversations. A lot of mothers cried so much because it was the first time they expressed negative feelings about being a mom and stopped pretending like it was all rosy and all good, because it's not. It was the first time they felt seen, they felt heard, and it was the first time they started to speak, and that improved their relationship with their children. When they start talking about the things they want to achieve, you know, what they want to do, you know. So I think mothers need that type of space. And that's why I was saying to you in the beginning that then it becomes controversial, because apparently Khao is okay with Zianda saying, oh, I actually don't like my kid right now. You know, but those are things we need to open up about.
Oh my God. Wow. So you've
I've triggered you. Excuse me.
You're saying something, you know, in 2020 I went back to school, and I tried to go back to school because when my daughter was born, she was sickly. And I remember the looks I got. They were like, and then what's gonna happen with the child? Like, it's sort of like you as you said, you take up the identity of umamaga Mimi. So if you do achieve some stuff, Mimi should come first more than your dreams. Why? That sounds so unfair, especially from the males. Why?
Yeah, it is very unfair. And that's what creates those feelings that I'm talking about. That's why mothers become resentful. And that's why mothers put up appearances. One of the things I used to say to my aunt, because she was like my mother, I was like, yo, when people are here, you're so nice. When they leave, oh my gosh, you are something else, because you are afraid to show them the real you, because ibile when you're an aunt, you're not a mother. You're an aunt. So for you, it's worse. They're going to say you're abusing this child who's not your child. How could you do that? But I think, again, it's patriarchy. It's the whole idea that there's something in your DNA, and in my DNA, that makes us mothers. And our job is to nurture. And because of the work that I do, I find that a lot of women only find out after having a child that actually this is not for them. A lot of women find out that they actually do not have that motherhood feeling. They don't feel like doing it. Like, once the child is here, they're like, this is just not for me. Like, I can't do this. And it's too late, because that's your child.
Exactly.
And you now need to show up for your child, you know. And a lot of the times it's like men are not wired that way. They are wired to provide. They are wired to, you know, make sure that you all have food. But there are some men who are nurturing. There are some men who have that I want to nurture a child in a feminine way, because femininity and masculinity are a spectrum. They are not an either or, right? It depends on which spectrum you are at. Either you're here or there or in the middle. It just depends on where you are. And I see that a lot, for example, in my current partner. He hates it when I say current partner. He wants me to say permanent partner. I see that in him, that he is so nurturing to children. He has that, I want to feed them. I want to change a nappy. I want to play. I want to, I want to do all of that. Whereas I'm nurturing, but I am so career focused as well at the same time. I am so, I'm there trying to make a legacy. Not that he's not career focused, but when the way in which we relate to our kids it's not the same. And I think there are many men who are like that, but were never given an opportunity to nurture. They were never, because they were told your job is this is how society works. That's why I say these are unspoken. Sometimes they are spoken, but they are rigid ways in which we show up in society. And I think that's why it's unfair, because now when as the end you have to sacrifice your dreams. Why can't you achieve your dreams while your partner or your husband holds the fort for a bit or supports you in it? Do you understand what I mean? Why should it be that when you delete yourself? And when we do that, even though some women would be like, oh yeah, I just live for my kids. In reality, if you have a real conversation with that woman, it's not really, it's not make sure, they say. So I think we are not given the opportunity to explore who we are more. We just get into these social designed, these are man-made things that we find culturally, and we just assume those responsibilities. It's even tough to also be a man, by the way. This whole thing that you must always be a provider, you must always do this and that. That thing is why we have such high suicide rates among men.
I was speaking about this with my cousin yesterday, and they have this. I was saying it's an old wives' tale. She said her child on Sunday she was visiting, and when she got home, her child played with her poo, which means somebody is pregnant in the family. So I'm like, no, it's not me. It's not me. After this one, I said, God forbid, it's closed forever. And they were like, girl, you're Christian. What do you mean you can't have kids? And I'm like, no, it means the first one was supposed to be there, supposed not to be there. So it was like,
why would you say that?
Why would you say that? How do you think it'll make her feel? And I've spoken to her about it. I was not ready. I was not young. But I got into the parenting script, and it's okay. And I don't want you're not going to have any siblings. Why is it wrong? Why is it so traditional?
It's your life.
Exactly.
It affects you. It's your decision.
And we are so scared to say it out that, what about my mental health? That's all it takes, as you said, not only on the body, on the finances, and the dreams you might not have to fulfill because they're there and they're permanent.
I think my life would have been different if my son didn't come when he came. And people are often like, why do you say that? Why? I'm like, because I would have done more things. Because unfortunately, when you have a child, life will change. Exactly. It has to change. I always say that I had a young cousin who got pregnant just after matric. And it was almost as if I'm bullying her, but I wasn't. But I kept saying, Nana, life as you know it is going to fundamentally change. Your script is changed. It's not a negative thing all in all. There are positives and negatives in between that. You just need to find out which are positive and find out in your own journey which are negative. But life is going to fundamentally change. There's a new person who is wholly dependent on you, and they are going to be wholly dependent on you for the next 18 to 20 years, depending on when they become self-sufficient. But for now, you are their caregiver. Whether Okono Baba or he's not there, you are going to be responsible for this person. You cannot make decisions anymore without thinking about that person. You can never make a decision just for yourself. Unfortunately, from now on, every decision you make affects and impacts on that child. Every step you take affects and impacts on that child. My son is now 10, and he's always like, your decisions affect me, right? Because we openly talk about it.
In this generation, he might not even be there. He might just check out
Yes.
and come back when the child is in his
older.
20s.
And you can't stop that process as well. You can't say, no, I'm going to deny him to see his child because he wasn't here. You can't deny the child the opportunity to make that decision for themselves. That's unfortunately the decisions we need to make. And that's why for me, motherhood will never, ever again be my personality. I will never. I did it once. I'm not doing it again. I'm Khao before I'm Umpile's mother or Longo's mother. I'm Khao Palelwe. And how do I navigate being Khao Palelwe and being their mother at the same time is the one thing that I'm journeying around. And it's made life so much more easier. And it's made me look forward to parenting moments because I also choose myself.
So let's get into co-parenting.
Yes.
We have seen DJ Zintle's journey to co-parenting. Like, she's out there. So I'll use her as an example because she put away her ego. As she says, you need to get over yourself, your feelings, to make co-parenting work. Why do you think we have not opened up to that?
Yeah. I think it's because we are a generation that is overzealous about having children and doing it in marriage. Even though for generations and generations, we've seen that script is not always the script, right? But I think we haven't learned enough how to do this co-parenting thing without the toxicity. And I think it's because we exist within our inner children. So I always say there are so many people whose inner child are the ones raising a child. There are so many people whose inner child who's very wounded, who's very complicated, who hasn't healed, who's in a relationship with you or with me. We show up, even at work. There are people who do weird things and you look and you're like, what's going on? What happened at home? That's an inner child wound. That person has not dealt with whatever they went through, the trauma they've been going through. But also I think we do not normalize seeking therapy and help. And I think it's also because there's lack of accessibility for Black people in a lot of the times. We cannot access these mental health spaces that help us heal. I think we often, more than not, weaponize our children against our partners. And that's unfortunate because your child is not an accessory that you are going to use to get back at someone. But I also think we deny ourselves our feelings. I do not subscribe to the idea that co-parents need to suppress how they feel and let it go for the benefit of the child, because I don't think it's realistic. I don't think it actually does happen. I think what ends up happening is you end up pretending and you end up resentful, and these things show up and they impact on the co-parenting relationship. And by saying do not suppress your feelings, I'm not saying lash out at your co-parent every 5 minutes because they hurt you and now you want to heal and be better. I'm saying seek help for you. Do not base it on that person, so that you can heal and you can try to have a better co-parenting relationship. It's harder when the other parent is not doing the emotional labor and the emotional work, and you're the only one doing it. And that's why I always say to co-parents, do not also allow yourself to be abused by the other parent for the sake of being the bigger person, for the sake of the child. At the end of the day, your child is going to know that you're being abused. It's going to show up. You can't hide it forever. And it's going to impact also how you relate to your child. So I think we don't prioritize seeking therapy. Co-parents can actually go to therapy together if they want to, and if it's possible. They can, if they want to. I guess your reaction is telling me, I guess there must be a level of co-parenting you're at to be able to do that. But also go to therapy separately or talk about it. But also remember that at the end of the day, there's a child who requires that both of you show up and show up as your best selves. How does showing up as your best selves look like? How do you support each other? Because once we break up, it's like, oh, I don't care about Zianda. Zianda doesn't care about me. But Zianda is the mother of my child. You know? How is the father of my child? Why should I now stop caring about her? You get what I mean? Like, we don't have to be besties.
Exactly.
We don't have to be visiting each other and talking on the phone every day. But how do I make parenting easier for Zianda? And how does Zianda make parenting easier for me? And that's what I always emphasize with the fathers of my children. That you can't make it impossible for me to be a mother. And I can't make it impossible for you to be a dad, because what are we scoring? Cheap points. Is this a competition? This child needs both of us.
That's true.
You get what I mean? So you win, okay? You're a parent of the year. Does that make your child happy? That the other parent is not parent of the year? That you are parent of the year? So, okay, fine. Your oxytocin is happy. You got the feeling of you're the best parent because I messed up maybe. And you made it difficult for me. Is your child happy that you're the best parent of the year? Or does your child require 2 best parents of the year? They require 2 best friends of the year. And how do we do that for each other? Do we make it difficult? No, why? I need to understand your circumstances. You need to understand mine. And we need to find a way that works for both of us. Yeah.
Wow. Why are we so used to toxicity? I saw in one of your videos, there's ladies who were like, I will never co-parent. I will never be the bigger person. My boundaries will be stronger than anything. So why do we fail, number one, to place healthy boundaries, and not boundaries that will impede on the child, but healthy boundaries, because we must respect the other partner. And number 2, why are we so used to toxicity, especially if the other partner moved on or they got married and had other kids? Is it a reminder that maybe they failed in their relationship, or they didn't get the partner? They were not chosen for marriage.
I think it could be several things at once, which is some of the reasons you've mentioned. Some people are projecting. They're projecting their own feelings. But some people are hurt. A lot of women are hurt. And that's the hurt I want to speak to. Because if we don't deal with that hurt, Zianda, we are not going to get to where they are free from that. Because even that, I'm not going to be the bigger person. That's not a nice place to be in. Like constantly having to check yourself, constantly having to fight back. That can't be healthy for you either, right? So a lot of people are carrying pain. But you know what's more difficult? It's when the pain continues. So you see, if you cheated on me when we were dating and we've now moved on, we are raising a child, I need to find my healing here. But if you're continuously hurting me and making it difficult for me, there are exes who continue to abuse their exes. That makes it very difficult for a person to move on. And that's why they do need those stronger boundaries that are like bricks and walls and the wall of China, because you can't consistently be abused. But it's so sad because it impacts on the child. And I know of some moms who are trying to move on, who are trying to co-parent in a healthy way, but they continuously experience being subjected to abusive behavior. Because one of the things that people talk about a lot online, and I believe it, is that, people, once you become exes, become so cruel. Doesn't matter the gender. People become so mean, unnecessarily so. And now there's a child here and you hate me. How does it work? I mean, I feel so sad for the women who comment on my post and say, I hate him. Because I can't imagine how difficult that must be. Like, that must be hard. Because there are fathers who come and say, I'm not going to send money for nappies unless you sleep with me. That's coercion. That's rape. That's problematic. That person should be arrested. But also people struggle because they don't get justice. Maintenance courts don't do their work. People don't get their justice. So the issues are complex. Some people, it's their families. It's their families that also drew them to break up, right? Now their families are dragging this whole thing for their own issues and their own struggles. So sometimes you need to sit on your own. That's what I'm saying. Prioritize therapy. Prioritize what works for you and your kids, but also consider the other parents. But if hurt is still ongoing, it's very difficult to try and co-parent healthy.
Before I forget, do you think the law is on the woman's side or it's on both sides? Because I remember I saw a post on Facebook. A lady was saying the father sends 500 for each child and she's got 2 kids. And the comments were like, it's better than nothing. Mine doesn't even send anything. And she's like, times are tough. In Ramaphosa's economy, what does 500 do? And they're like, the law, if she goes to maintenance court and wants more, they'll say, take out your 500. He takes out his 500. And she's saying she has opened up to him that I'm not working. Can you please increase? Because when she was working, she was doing everything.
Yeah.
So do you think the law is for the mothers or the law is either or?
I think the law tries to do its best to do what's in the best interest of their child. And sometimes what's in the best interest of the child is not in the best interest of the mother or the father. It just depends on how the other person interprets it or how it impacts on their lives. But I must say that there are several ways in which the law does prioritize moms. And there are several ways that men can use the law to their own advantage. So it really depends on situation by situation. I mean, I know of a friend who the law, I believe, is on her side, and rightfully so. And I know of friends where the law is not on their side. So a lot of women do complain around the law and what it does. But I do know that for lawmakers, the point is to try to do things for the best interest of the child. And sometimes it's not in the best interest of either parent or one of the parents. One of the parents might feel it unfair. Most of the times what I hear is the whole thing of the money is not enough for a lot of mothers because this 500 is nothing. And when the court calculates, because apparently there's men who even like manipulate their income. Because when the law then calculates and says you can only provide 500.
Others resign from work.
Yes, others resign from work. So it really depends on your situation and your circumstances.
And it's so unfair. Like, you can't do that. You can't do that. So I want to know, do you believe in the concept of reparenting yourself? As I've heard on social media that you give yourself what your parents couldn't give yourself.
Yeah, so I always say that when I was young and I was going through a lot, I always thought somebody somewhere will come and rescue me. And because of the movies I watched, the books I read, I always thought it's going to be some kind of guy who's going to come marry me on a white horse and my life is going to be perfect again. Then I became an adult and I learned that it's the adult you that comes to save you. It's the adult you that comes to rescue you. And one of the things I always say, I said it recently on my birthday, that I am so grateful that the adult me shows up in the way that she does now for me. Because before, she used to show up in very toxic ways to try and protect me. She has to be self-destructive, which was normal for someone who had experienced trauma and was never taught to be resilient, was never taught to emotionally regulate. And as is usually said, trauma changes you, right? So when you're a child and you're experiencing trauma, you get all these coping mechanisms, right, that are immature. Then you don't learn, you don't heal and you don't learn mature coping mechanisms. So you use the same coping mechanisms that you used to use as a child. Now you adapt them when you're an adult. And when you're an adult, you have a little bit more power than you had as a child. You even go a little bit step further to be self-destructive. So I think I feel very fortunate that the adult me, the journey went the way it went, and I got to learn more about healing and the fact that healing is a journey and not a destination. And I continue to be on this journey. I'm constantly reparenting myself. And the same grace that I'm giving my children now is the same grace that I need to give myself. Parents now are doing affirmations with their children. And I'm hoping to God they do them on their own too. I'm hoping to God that you're doing your affirmations for yourself as well, because it's highly likely that you didn't have the same affirmations as a child. And reparenting yourself is hard because nobody ever taught you how to do that. But I learned from parenting my children, and I learned from how other people are reparenting themselves as well. And I go to therapy, guys. I go to therapy, guys. And I speak to a psychologist, and they teach me ways in which I can reparent myself and calm down. Because the problem with trauma is your nervous system. And when you said, like, why are we so used to toxicity? Sometimes it's the mind. So one of the things I learned in therapy was that my brain got accustomed to chaos as a child because I was around chaos. There was too many fights, too much drama. You understand. Some people might relate to this. And when I became an adult and I started making life choices, okay, I'm settling down, I went to what I know, which was chaos. And whatever was not chaotic was boring and not stimulating because my brain is used to getting that high. not only the high of the toxicity, but also the high of fixing, and then back to the toxicity again because you want that high of fixing. So the brain actually gets used to toxicity. It loves it because that's what it knows. That's what it was exposed to for a very long time. Now imagine the unlearning and reprogramming your brain out of that toxicity. It's a lot of work and you can't do that on your own. My psychiatrist was like, how? You know, for me, it took meds, it took therapy, it took being admitted. People make jokes about psychiatric hospitals now, and I'm always like, yo, don't know. Y'all actually don't know. Y'all laugh at Vescopies. And I find that a lot of Black people get severely mentally ill, not because they were born that way, but because of how much they haven't dealt with trauma that their brains literally break. It's the easiest term I can use. Like your brain breaks because you could have gotten help sooner. Like I've heard of parents talk about he was working, he was fine, then everything changed. It's witchcraft. I'm not saying witchcraft doesn't exist, but a lot of the times check on unchecked trauma and how it impacts on mental health. All of a sudden your child doesn't want to go to work anymore. All of a sudden your child doesn't want to wake up in the morning because they're now over 30 and the chickens have come to roost. The trauma is like, okay, I'm still here. I'm going to sit on you. There's illustrations online of how where trauma sits on different people and how it weighs on you and how you even feel that emotionally. So I think a lot of us are not healing and are not prioritizing our healing, but I think our adult self, reparenting ourselves is a journey. And you don't always have to do it by yourself. You actually don't have to do it by yourself. And if talk therapy is not your thing, because I have friends who don't do talk therapy. They do music therapy, they do art, nature. There's different types of ways you can do therapy. But I think also one other thing that we thrive from as human beings is community. And without it, we're nothing.
You spoke of something trauma. Why do we I think I'm also seeing this in my age mates that you can fix trauma by financial stability or by your achievements. I remember my youth pastor, I could see he had a strained relationship with his parents. His trauma could be seen in the way he preaches about his parents. Same as my mom. Her trauma could be seen in the way she could relate with my grandmother. The same as after she passed on, my trauma could be seen in the things that I've noticed after she was gone and why they kept on saying this is witchcraft, and it was mental health. Why do you want to equate it as if you can achieve this, this will not matter? The trauma will not matter. But it's there. I'm in my 30s. I'm forgetting. I've been forgetting. It is not witchcraft. I've achieved what I needed to achieve, but it's not going away.
So I'll make an example of someone we all know, Whitney Houston.
Wow.
Whitney Houston. Think of Whitney Houston and her life and how Whitney Houston was a world superstar, probably made billions of US dollars in her lifetime. Arrived where she arrived, but she still had the emptiness. She still had the hole. She still had, when she was alone, she knew the truth. And she tried to fill it with drugs. And that's what ultimately killed her, because what drugs do, they are a quicker way to not feel that emptiness. But what they are then doing to you is, as you take them, they're messing you up, right? They're chewing at you. It's like a eating thing. It's like eating at you every moment you try. And apparently by the time she died, because there's different types of drugs, like the fancy ones and she was taking like the cheap stuff. So I use Whitney Houston a lot because we all adored her. We all loved her. And we saw how much fame, she acquired. But I also want to reflect on Ricky Rick, right? I always use these people as examples because Ricky Rick's life teaches us a lot about mental health and how there's no quick fix, and he himself admitted to, I love that there's a friend of his who went on Twitter and talked about how Ricky was looking for help. Ricky was seeking therapy. Ricky was on meds. But ultimately he chose this as healing because the suffering was just too much, and it's sad, but that's the reality of mental health. There's no quick fixes. And a lot of people will tell you that actually the more they achieve, the lonelier they get because the people around them do not love them for them. They love them for what they have. And it gets worse because that's where you meet the vultures. That's when you meet the people who just want to know Zianda and be close to Zianda and have proximity to Zianda so that they can benefit from having that proximity. So achieving your dreams and goals is nice, but at some point, for some people who've not dealt with a lot of things, it can actually make you feel more empty. And you realize that what you're looking for, there's nothing wrong with being financially stable or achieving things. It can be quite fulfilling. But if you're chasing that to close off something else, then it doesn't really work.
Yeah. So let's get into teenagers.
What about them?
Why is it so difficult to parent teenagers? Number one, and why is it so difficult to have open conversations with them, like open policies of the dangers out there and sex education, particularly?
I think it's because like I said, we raise our smaller children like they're doormats. And then we want to continue that as they change and develop. But unfortunately, a teenager's brain is not wired like a toddler's brain. And if you had practiced that open communication and treating them as a human being from early on, it wouldn't be so difficult when they're older, because the difference between the 2-year-old and the teenagers, the 2-year-old will challenge you, but at some point they're going to give up because they're 2. The teenager is going to challenge you because that's what their brain is telling them. So what I usually say to parents when I'm doing coaching sessions, which I haven't done in a while because of work, but I usually say to them, when you used to follow, I don't know what people follow, but I used to follow Baby Center. And it would tell me where my fetus is, how big. Sometimes they compare the fetuses to fruits. And they tell you this is what's developing, this is what's not developing, or what you should expect. That's how you would also know, and your doctor will also know that something might be wrong. But what it's also telling you is about the brain development. It's also telling you about the psychological and emotional development. What people don't know is that at the age of 2 to 3, the toddler stage, the one that we call the devil toddler stage, the terrible twos, that's actually when the psychological and emotional part of human beings start to develop. And that's why it's so chaotic, because it's hormonal, it's up and down, because it's growing. And that's why it's so intense. It feels super hectic. And then when you get to the teenager stage, it's that plus now hormonal changes as well. So, and then being in you're not an adult, but you're so close. And what people also don't know is that the nature of human beings is to develop higher than what their conscious self is right now. So we're always going to challenge. We are predisposed to be challenging because we want to know better. That's why we call ourselves the higher beings. There's a lot of things that are alive, but there's a reason why we are human, right? True. So teenagers think of a toddler having big emotions, but then now think of a toddler having big emotions with a bigger body, with a bigger brain. Now knows a little bit more about themselves. We do not get to know our kids, Zianda. We do not understand our children. And it goes back to that lack of information as number one. We do not get to learn. So my son is 10. There are days where he's just like, I actually just really don't want to talk. But because we now have open communication and he's self-regulated, he's able to say, I'm annoyed. I'm going to sit in my room. I don't feel like hanging out with you right now, right? A parent who doesn't know much about what's going on there would be like, this is rude, this is disrespectful. But actually, he's growing. And there are certain things that he doesn't understand. He's moody. Then he has growth spurts. There are days where they eat too much. Like you're like, hey, boy, you're finishing loaves and loaves of bread. There are parts of their brain and their bodies that are growing because they are constantly developing. And they are changing. The child you had a week ago is not the child that you have now. Teenagers will test your limits more than the 2-year-old. So it's lack of understanding from our side and lack of knowing how to relationship with our teenage kids, and lack of understanding them. When I was a teenager, one of the things I will tell you is that I felt misunderstood. It's almost also as if there is this expectation that teenagers are going to fuck up. Sorry. Mess up. There's this expectation that teenagers are going to mess up. But what we don't know is that whether they're a teenager or they're a toddler, human beings are predisposed to explore and check where their limits can take them. Our job as parents, which is a very difficult job, is not easy, is to create a safe environment to do so. And I'm not talking just about parents in the home. And this is where people get it wrong. I'm talking about the entire society. So when teenagers are busy eating drugs, when teenagers are at Enyobeni, jiving up and down and being killed because of some spray that went out, how are we as a society creating a safe environment for our teenagers and our kids to develop and explore? We are all responsible for creating a safe society. You can't just put the work on parents. You understand what I mean? We need to also keep our government accountable. Why are there people selling alcohol to children?
Exactly.
Why are there people selling drugs to children? Is that a safe environment? Children are a reflection of their society. There is so much that parents can do in their home. Children still need to go outside. They need to explore. Do you understand what I mean? One of the things my father used to do when I was in varsity, and he never stopped saying it, he always used to say, when you're out, because he never used to allow me in matric. But in varsity, he knew he can't stop me from going out. And he used to say to me, when you're out and something happens, call me. I don't care what time it is. I am going to come fetch you. So my dad was always on high alert. If you're somewhere, you're drinking and something is strange or something is weird, call me to come fetch you. Because he knew what is out there. But he also knew that I'm going to go out. There's nothing stopping me from going out. So I think I want not just parents, but I want every single person in society to think about what environment they are creating to make it safer for children to explore and test their own limits because they're human beings. People will always say, it's not my kids, why should I care? You will care when they are on drugs and they are mugging you. It impacts on you. The nature of who children become impacts on you. When they are nyaope boys, or what do we call them, paras, it affects you that you just got off a taxi from work and the child grabbed you and grabbed your bag. You are going to blame Zianda as a parent, but what are you as a community member who might or might not have children doing to ensure that we've lost the sense of community, Zianda. That's why parents are struggling to raise teenagers and we are struggling in general. We have lost a sense of community. We have lost the sense that it's all our responsibility. When they say a children is raised by a village, they don't just mean your family. They mean the guy at the tech shop who is going to question that man who stands in front of a 16-year-old and say, why are you talking to a 16-year-old like that? Why is a child in your car? You know what I mean? Communities always know. Before a teenager gets pregnant, communities always know whose car she was in. But what do? We blame the parents and we blame the child. We don't create standards for our communities that we say we are going to live by. You know, someone who's from the Eastern Cape once told me that back in the day, before modern times, whenever there was someone who was behaving out of sight in a community, there would always be a lehotla. And they'd always be before courts. There'll always be tribal courts. They had their own problematicness. Everything has a pro and con. But what I loved about it was the sense of community. You know, nowadays it's like, I'm doing my thing, I'm doing my own thing. You know, there's no sense of we all have a responsibility to our environment. And we all have a responsibility to say that, okay, we have kids who are trying to explore and trying to test how do we make it safer. We don't sell them alcohol. You know what I mean? We don't make money of children drinking alcohol. You know, so that's what makes it tough. We've lost a sense of community, and I feel like Black people need that sense of community back. It was taken away from us, of creating our own values, to say this is our value. We don't beat our kids, we don't do it, but we create an environment. You know, someone was saying, I nearly spoke about something I'm not supposed to, but I was somewhere yesterday with my partner, and someone said to me, they live in this estate, and they said to me, you know, what's nice about the estate is even if their kids are walking around, every single member of the estate feels responsible for the children because they have children. One day it's not your child, it's your niece or your nephew. So you pay it forward. So if they see anything dodge or whatever, or they see the kids need help, they're not going to say, oh, where are the parents? Or why are the parents not around? They make sure that people drive according to the speed limit because that's what's supposed to happen. They are children who live in this environment. They are part of this society. So I'm very passionate about that. I feel like we've lost our sense of community. We don't feel responsible for the environment that we create for human beings to be and for children to grow and develop. Yeah.
You. Wow. So why is it so difficult to begin sex education talks with our kids?
Yeah. I think it comes from history. The like what I said to you when we say kids are to be heard, not seen. And we are afraid also of our children. We are afraid of normalizing that they should have sex. Because what we want to do is to protect them from it because we don't want them to have children with the young. We don't want them to catch any kind of illnesses. But again, we also don't know the developmental milestone and whatever's of children and when they start exploring. We don't get to know that stuff. Or no matter what you do, they are going to explore because their body is telling them to explore. Their body is feeling things. And that's outside of their control. Yours is to guide them into doing it right. But parents also don't know where to start. They were never given sex education themselves. They explored sex on their own, you know. And then we have the religious side of things that says sex before marriage is a sin. And I don't like to hate on people's religions, so I respect that for people. I think for more secular parents who don't believe in that, you need to talk to your kids about sex. I guess Christian parents can pray with their kids and have conversations with their kids. I don't know. But on my side, I think what I've learned is our bodies change. Our bodies tell us. Our bodies. I mean, I remember when I first started feeling sexual feelings and didn't know what that was. And I wish I would have had someone to talk to me through that and had an open conversation around what that feel. What is that? You know, and had got a conversation about responsible sex. And there's nothing wrong with telling your kids to wait. You know, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not advising parents to encourage their kids to have sex. No. I think it's actually, for me, having seen the impact of teen pregnancy in our community, it's very important that we do encourage for our children to wait. But also we have a very toxic relationship with sex. Our society has a very toxic relationship with sex. And if you don't talk to your kids about sex, they won't know what's the difference between sex and rape. And they will also be caused a lot of trauma. The sad thing is, because of lack of talking about sex, not just with our parents, it's a lot of responsibility to put on parents on their own. Schools as well, but I know South African parents are rejecting comprehensive sexuality education, which is very strange for me because I think it's an important platform for kids to know what's the right and wrong in their exploration, because if you are not talking to them about it, they're going to find it somewhere. And maybe they're not going to experience it in the way that you need them to. And they're not going to be able to come to you and open up to you and tell you about it. You're going to find out when they are 30-something years old and they are now tired of being quiet of your shenanigans. And they will tell you, I was raped, you know? And now the chickens have come to roost. Like after 30, it comes for us, this trauma. So I really think it's difficult, but there are ways in which we can talk about sex with our kids that are comfortable and age appropriate. Like I'll tell you now, my 10-year-old is not ready for that conversation. It shows. But he is curious about certain things. Like he's asked me before, how is a baby made and whatnot and whatnot. Also, your kids are curious from a very young age. And if you can practice talking to them and answering them age appropriately. So you know, if my 5-year-old asks me how is a baby made, there's nothing I can say that will make him actually understand. So I need to find a way to either explain to him to say, I used to say to my now 10-year-old when you was 5 that I'll explain when you're older. We'll talk about it later. Because right now I don't think your brain capacity is going to be able to grasp what I'm saying to you. So it's unfortunate that we don't talk to our kids about sex, but ourselves as well, our parents as well, had a very toxic relationship with sex. As a society, porn and all these other things, our country, also sexual violence. And I think for us, because of the rape stats in this country, we need to do it.
We need to do it.
Yeah, we need to do it. We need to talk to it. We need to create an open environment. For me, my worst fear is my kids exploring things out there without ever feeling like they can come talk to me. You know, because it's sad and unfortunate that a lot of, apparently, 1 in 3 South African girls will have experienced sexual violence by the age of, I think it's 15 or 16, and that's way too many, and that shouldn't be happening. But also boys. Boys go through very hectic first encounters of what should be sexual intercourse, and they don't talk about it, even worse than us. And it creates so much trauma and unsaid things that ends up being a disaster.
Why do you think also it is seen as a parental failure if a child becomes pregnant or was sexually abused and they did not open up in time? Like, we should have gone to the police, we should have got you help. And the first thing everyone says, what did you do wrong?
Because parents are expected to be superpowers and supermans. It's the whole thing we talked about the pressure of being a parent.
And also sexual grooming, something that is so prevalent in our society. And we think, why didn't she notice anything that this child is starting to be sexually active?
Also because, I mean, there's so many reasons, but mothers and parents are expected to know all the ins and outs of their children. It's that whole thing of expecting us to be in control. Have you seen how if you're with your child in public and your child starts crying or throwing a tantrum, everybody just looks at you like, what the hell, And it's that whole sense of you've lost control. And that's why parents end up beating their children because they want to regain control and they want to show people that I am in control. But then that creates more trauma, and then that embarrasses you more later in life because you are trying to show people that when you are by fire by force parent, you are that mother who will slap a child anytime, And we've created that as our personality. I don't know if you saw recently an actress, I don't remember which, Avatiswa. She spoke about how, as an actress, she's disrespected by writers because in the script they were saying that the child talks back at her.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then she does nothing about it in the show. And she felt like that's not our culture.
It's Nambita
Nambita, sorry, Vatiswa. And I found that very ironic because I was like, why is it that Black people see violence in parenting as our culture?
Exactly.
That's not my culture. One of the things that for me, I've always said I work towards is being the mother who doesn't, there's this toxic Black mother. Apparently a Black mother will show you flames and we joke about it online. We joke about it. But then on other days we create TikToks about how painful it is. So which is it, right? And we need to be honest. And I always want to say that I do not want that identity on me, that I'm going to be that Black mother who just slaps a child. Because apparently you get the trophy award for being the most controlled parent, or you can control your kids. Because how, The unfortunate thing about that is, okay, fine, you appear as this parent who's in control in front of everybody, but what is your actual relationship with your child? How does your child feel about how your relationship with them? And why do you constantly see every action they make a failure of you? It's that whole thing of we center ourselves and we don't center our children. We put their humanity, like I said, away. So it's about Zianda because, Zianda gave birth to me. So she owns everything about me. Every action I make, everything I do, we put it on Zianda because, hey, she's my owner. She's my handler. But then one of the conscious parenting practitioners and psychologists that I would recommend people to go read her books, it's Dr. Her name is running away from me now. But the book is called The Conscious Parent. I don't know why her name is gone from my head. If you just find the book called The Conscious Parent, it's blue with butterflies. She's actually a doctor. She talks about how we, want to focus on controlling our kids more than having a relationship with our children. And allowing our kids to be human. She talks about how they are born themselves. They have a spirit inside of them. We always have this feeling of like when our child is born, we are like a puppet band with strings. and we control every other move they make. You can never do that to yourself.
That's true.
You can never do that to yourself. You need to accept your children for who they are and guide them. Your job is to guide, not to control. There's a difference between the two things, you know. And I think when you have relationship with children, it then becomes easier to talk about things that are uncomfortable. Even if they don't become uncomfortable anymore. I mean, me and my son, we talk about everything. When he started closing the door when he bathed, we talked about it. Like, why do you feel you need to hide your body from me? We had conversations around that. And that was important, and I had to respect his choices. But it was a journey I didn't want him to think he must be afraid to talk to me about. It was something, as his body changes and he becomes different and he grows, he must always know that he can always come to me and talk to me, you know. I'm not going to be like, oh my gosh, how could you? Put that condom away. I need to teach him how to use it. And if you can't as a parent and it's something that's uncomfortable for you, find someone who can.
You.
She's like, hey, yo.
I'm like, black parents watching this, like, what are these two kids saying?
Unfortunately, times are changing. And if black parents haven't noticed that this generation is different, the ship is leaving them.
The ship is leaving them.
You can stay there at the behind, but this generation is different and every generation is going to be different. And we need to have that intergenerational gap closed.
How do we change this parenting script to adapt the modern day child and the modern day parent? Because times have really changed. We can't be using the same things that we did, like beating, violence, because you think to yourself, if you can't find what you're looking for in the shop, do you beat up the owner? That's what I'm thinking. That's number one. How do we change the parenting script? And also admitting if we are failing. I'll make an example. I remember before my mom passed away in that year, I was watching a movie with her, and this lady, she separated from the father of her child, and the father was more responsible emotionally, financially, and the partner he had then was able to take care of the child. And she went and spoke to the couple and said, you can take over the child because, number one, I'm not educated. Number two, she needs experiences and you are rich. She's always here. I can't speak to her with that. And they did that and the child flourished. Why does that seem like it's a failure? Number one, you failed as a parent. Number two, why can't that be normalized? That if I'm not flourishing, if I'm not doing well, why can't I just send the child to the father? He could do a better job and it's fine.
I think it's, firstly, we must acknowledge that at the same time, that's painful, right? If I had to currently maybe lose my job, not be able to make money online, and my son has to be sent somewhere else. Firstly, that's not nice, right? So we must acknowledge that it's still a painful thing, right? But also I like what you're saying, to acknowledge that if you can't do something in the moment, and it goes back to the co-parenting thing and healthy co-parenting, the other co-parent can hold the fort without taking the child away from you completely, right? It's also based on trust, right? But I trust you enough, Zianda, to say, okay, we were together, we're no longer together. I am currently down. The child we had agreed lives with me, but circumstances have changed. Maybe another COVID happened and messed up our lives again. Now I have to bring the child to you. I must be able to trust you enough to say, if I leave my child with you, you're not going to create this wedge between me and my child. And they're not going to feel like you're the better parent than me. It's that whole thing again of competition, that we make parenting a competition. Why are we competing? We are raising a person,
exactly.
and that's hard. That's really difficult. So for me, it's not just about when you're not doing well financially. You can get sick. You can have a car accident and get a disability and have to function differently. Unfortunately, during that time, you will probably need help. Who is the trusted person? Could be the other parent. It could be an aunt. I find that a lot of times, mothers especially do not create a tribe for themselves, right?
That's true.
And you need a tribe. You need people that can be different people for your child. You can't be everything to your child. One of the things I had to accept was that my son is not going to tell me everything. Sometimes he's going to go to his auntie because, he relates to me differently. He's not afraid of me. But at that moment in time, he doesn't feel comfortable talking to me about his crush. And I remember the first time I used to feel like, but I'm your mom. I'm the one who takes care of you every day. I feel entitled. It's entitlement, right? I was feeling entitled, like my son must be able to tell me everything. My son must be able to come to me. The first time it happened, I was so hurt, like, you told her, not me. Now we are at a place where my son can speak to his aunts about anything and I don't take it personally because I should be grateful for the times that he feels open to me. And when he speaks to his aunts who are my friends or my other family members, he's much more comfortable with them and I must be happy that he's got a safe environment. Or his father and not me. So he's no longer a toddler. My 5-year-old, he spends a week at dad, spends a week with us. And those are not the same experiences. And I used to feel like, when he comes back and he was so happy at his dad's. At first, I used to feel like, are you happier there than here? You know? But then as time went on, I'm like, why should he not be happy when he comes from his father? Well, what's wrong with that? I should be actually happy for him that he gets to be happy and make childhood memories with his father. And I should be able to celebrate that and acknowledge that that's okay. Also, this whole week there, one day he's going to grow older and say, I actually don't like this anymore. Can I stay with dad or can I stay with mom? And we must be mature enough to not take that personally.
That's true.
You get what I mean? He's not saying I don't love you anymore. There's a mom who posted in a group the other day, said her daughter was having a birthday. And for that birthday, her daughter was like, she doesn't want her mother there.
You?
And I understood why the mother felt like, why not me? But she was so distraught. And I felt like the comments were a bit unfair in understanding where she comes from. This is your child's first 13th birthday or whatever, and they don't want you at the dinner. Every other year, you've been there with your father. And I felt like the comments were like, oh, it's what she wants. Why are you crying? I felt like we were not because she was coming to other mothers for advice. She was not going to the child and saying, how could you? That would be toxic and that would be different. And people were so nasty, and all I said was, don't talk about it now. And also the other parent might have more insight. That's why you need to have the co-parenting relationship where you don't judge each other, where I'm able to say, Zianda, this is how the child feels. How can I help you do better? Or how can you get what I mean? Because it benefits the child at the end of the day. When the other parent is down, it's not your time to celebrate and say, yes, it's my turn. Because parenting doesn't have a manual. At any time, the scripts can switch and change. So, yeah, I think I said a lot. I don't even remember where we were. But I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. I wanted to go into your work as the controversial work of the abortion activism.
Yeah.
When did it start? How did it start?
So it started around 2016, 17. I think 2016, I went on Facebook and I shared about having had an unsafe abortion in 2009 when I was still in university. I don't know why I did that. One day I just woke up and I remember the first person I texted was one of my besties. And I said to her, I'm going to write on Facebook today that I once had an abortion. I feel like there's so much silence around it. And we are always sitting in little rooms talking about it. I'm going to blast it on Facebook. And my friend was like, but why? I'm like, because I want to. It's like, I want to be, okay, good luck. I posted it and it went viral. And what was overwhelming was a lot of people who were messaging me either felt guilty and wanted to know how I got over it and even went public about it. A lot of people actually wanted to have one and didn't know where to go. But there were too many people and I couldn't reply to all of those people. I had a child, I had a job. And I would always wake up to so many messages. At some point, I actually wanted to delete it because it just went so viral. But what it told me was, while abortion is protected in law in South Africa, people didn't know where to go. But also people were feeling bad. And were feeling bad about something that is legal, something that South Africa as a country has decided is morally okay in its laws, And for me, that said, there's something we need to do about this. Government is not doing enough. And a lot of women are going to these unsafe places where they either lose their wombs, they get severe complications and become disabled, or unfortunately they die. That could have been me. That could be my daughter tomorrow or somebody else's daughter. not in a country where abortion is supposed to be legal, where there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a medical procedure. So we started a group called, I talked about it earlier, Abortion Support. But then from that, we started one called, Black Women Healing Garden. And from that, we started Abortion Support South Africa. And at first, we were just a Facebook page. And what we would do is we would answer DMs about where to go. We would help people find safe clinics. That's number one. So we did a lot of calling around. And these were a bunch of women. Some worked at a bank. One is a filmmaker. I was a journalist. It was just a bunch of feminists that I met online. And we would do shifts. And it showed that there's a need, because there was never a time where we didn't have a message. And it was usually younger women and teenagers. And I think for me, what we provided was a space where people can find out where to go to get a safe abortion. Because people were so accustomed and used to going to these unsafe places where they have complications and things happen. And people want to have kids later in life. And people were feeling lonely, not knowing who to talk to because they're going to be judged at home or by their friends. And we did that for several years until just after the COVID lockdown, we partnered with an organization called Women on Web. It's a Canadian organization, and they've been providing digital telemedical abortion referral service. I'll explain what that is. For years and years and years, like for a very long time. Essentially what that means is, instead of the traditional going to a clinic and getting checked and getting an appeal or getting the surgical abortion, they do it all digitally to make it easier, quicker, and less expensive. So to make it low cost. So what we did then is we partnered with them, because creating such a website is so expensive. We are cloning theirs. So we are testing the same model in South Africa. What that essentially means is in South Africa, you go on our website. We still haven't put up the WhatsApp number yet. We're still on that. But all of these digital things are actually quite expensive. We are non-profit, so we're not like Maristops. We don't make money from the abortions. Our operations are purely, we work on funding. That's how we pay staff. That's how we pay the doctors. That's why we pay to make the service work. So once you've gone on the website and you've done the consultation, we refer you to one of our partner doctors who confirms that you're eligible for the abortion. Then we've been partnering with pharmacies across the country. We're not yet where we want to be, because some pharmacies don't want to do it, or some of the owners are anti-abortion. There's just so many things you come across. But people can then go pick up their medication at the pharmacy closest to them, or we deliver to them at a cost of 200 or 770, depending on what combination of pills they choose. So the idea behind that for me was, we need to save more lives. Just because it's illegal doesn't mean it's accessible. Women are still afraid to go to clinics because they experience stigma. Nurses are still telling them that what they're doing is a sin. People are not adhering to the law. People are not adhering to what the Choice of Termination of Pregnancy Act says. And the fact that the fact of the matter is that the act itself exists because women were dying from illegal abortions. So it's a life-saving process, but it's also an advocacy process to say motherhood should be a choice, parenting should be a choice.
True.
Nobody should be forced into something they don't want to do, if there is a way to make sure that it doesn't continue or go ahead. So for me, it's also about reclaiming abortion as a medical procedure and not a moral conversation. We are not talking about morality, right or wrong. We are talking about a medical procedure. Nobody goes around saying, oh, it's a sin to get circumcised. Nobody says that. Everybody has the freedom to go circumcise. Even the lie that we've been told that you're killing a baby in Dondona. So yeah, I had an unsafe abortion in 2009 after experiencing rape, and the fact that I had it in a country where abortion had been legal from before the time I was born was ridiculous.
Wow. Why do you think we can't reconcile, we can't make peace with the fact that, as people say, it's a medical term more than a moral term, and it's nurses who are not Christian or religious, but they'll say, "Uyobulala, you killing." Why?
I think it all comes from the history of religion and the fact that even our culture has embedded in us that, a child is a blessing. It's also an assumption, right, that the minute you're pregnant, you're going to have a child.
Yeah.
We don't know. We can't, no doctor or nurse or gynecologist can guarantee you when you tell them that I am 12 months pregnant, that there's going to be a baby that comes out after 9 months. Anything can happen. So I think it comes from our history, but it also comes from the control of women's bodies and patriarchy. I mean, we control what women wear. We control how women show up. Yeah, the control of women's bodies as well. We control how women dress. We control how women walk. Social media has even made it worse. What women put on their heads, what women eat, what they drink, their choices. Oh my gosh, there's nothing that a woman does that the world does not have an opinion on. What more the fact that they are carrying what people perceive as their God-given task, So I think as a society, we haven't reconciled with the humanity of women.
Yeah. Wow.
It's a loaded.
It's a loaded answer. It's a loaded answer. I want to know, what do you say to people who say you are a killer? I've seen the comments. The first time I discovered you was on Gilebukhile Mabocha's show where you were speaking on abortion, and the comments there were wild.
Yeah.
Like, your body is carrying caskets and caskets. Years into it, into the work, what do you say to people who say you're a killer? You're just a killer. That's just an excuse.
Okay, firstly, I no longer have conversations with people who call me a killer because it's none of their business. This is my body, my choice, my life, right? So I don't go into a back and forth with people who call me a killer. I used to before when I used to fight for myself. But now it's like, you can't change what people believe. There's nothing I can do or say that will convince people that I'm not a murderer if that's what they think. Unless I'm trying to teach other people something from that comment, I'm not going to entertain it. So sometimes I'll get comments on TikTok like that, and I'll decide maybe this is a moment for me to reach other people who might be persuaded, unlike those who are not. But I don't have back and forth. It used to hurt in the beginning because I just didn't understand why. But now it's one of those things that doesn't really bother me at all. And I think it's because I've seen how critical the work is. I've seen how my story has changed so many women's lives and saved so many women's lives and kept the mothers of so many children alive. Because a lot of the times when women have abortions, you find that they already have kids. So for me, it's been a long journey, and my focus now has always been on the critical work of access to abortions.
So there's a term that people like to ask you. They say, "Ugezile na, did you do a spiritual cleansing or according to culture? And if you didn't, it's going to affect your finances, your career, and you might not have kids ever again." Can you reconcile that with a psychological thing, or it's just in their minds? There's no such thing.
I think it's part and parcel of the myths that come with around abortion. I mean, there's so many things that are untrue, like people saying if you have sex with someone who's had an abortion, you're going to die. There's just so many myths that come with having an abortion, and I consider that as one. But there are a lot of women who come to speak to me and want to do cleansings, or they're Christian and they feel like, should I or should I not do a confession or whatever, right? And what I always say to people is, I will never tell you what is going to heal you. You know your own journey. If for you, spiritually, you believe that a cleansing and naming of those abortions or that termination or what you consider as a spirit of a baby is something that will help you heal through, because for me, an abortion is not something you need to heal from. It's the stigma that you need to heal from. Because studies have shown that actually many women feel relief after having an abortion. The guilt only comes because of stigma and cultural beliefs and all of that. But for me, I always say to women, whatever is going to help you move on from what you're feeling right now, do it. But don't do what I did, because me and you are not the same person. I don't believe in cleansings. My life is okay. I have 2 beautiful children that came out of my womb. Nothing stopped them from coming. The only thing that could have stopped them was the inability to access a safe abortion. because abortions, people don't know this, but they're actually safer than pregnancy. And people are always shocked when I say that, but an abortion is safer than pregnancy because people become diabetic and go through the most during pregnancy. People have high risk pregnancies. People lose their teeth. People get gangrene. There's just so much that happens with complications of pregnancy. So for me, I always say to people when they come and say, Sissy, what do you think? Ngenzi cleansing. I tell them what I believe, and I tell them also, you can do what you believe. If going to church, confessing, and being prayed for is what's going to work for you, you are more than welcome to do it. I'm not the person to advise you on it, though, because I know nothing about it. So I can't pretend to know and understand, but I also can't say to women, don't do it. You know, it's your cultural belief. Some of them come to me and they are already sangomas themselves. And they be telling me that they are dreaming of this or that. I can't tell them that that's not true. That's their reality. They have to wake up every day dreaming of that. It's not something that I can say, you are just. No, I always say to them, do what you need to do to move on because what you did is not wrong. That's my chat. My chat is always, you did nothing wrong. Whatever is working for you, do it. It's going to work for you. I'm not a Christian. I used to be one. And one of the things I always say to the women who come to me who are Christian is, Jesus already done this for you. Go to him. The Bible is very clear. Anybody else who says anything different is lying to you. Because if we are to go with the Bible and Christianity that I used to be deep in, from what I understand, God is not shocked by our abortion. God knew. God has forgiven it because Jesus came to die for our sins. So what's going on? I don't believe personally that it's a sin. But if it's something that someone believes and they can't move on because of that belief, I can't change that for them, you know. Someone also messaged me on TikTok the other day and said, Joe, my friend is pregnant. She doesn't know what to do. Can you talk to her? I was like, I do not convince women to have abortions. That's not my role. My role is to help women get access when they've already decided that this is what they want to do. My role is to talk to women about guilt and where it stems from, you know. My role is not to come to you and say, hey, yenzi abortion. That's your choice, and I respect that. So I always keep my boundaries very, very clear as well. So calling me a murderer does nothing to me now. I know I'm not a murderer. Motherhood is a choice, and I made it a choice, and it's much easier to navigate when it's a choice. I've spoken to and I've seen too many women who couldn't get an abortion and are mentally not okay, psychologically not okay, financially not okay. And none of these people who call you murderers are going to send you a bunch of nappies.
Exactly.
None of these people who call you murderers are going to come and babysit for you. That's on you when that time comes. Or when you have a miscarriage, none of them are going to be there to come and comfort you. So I don't focus my energy so much on that.
Why do you think society places pressure, particularly on the Black community? Because I've seen a lot of talk shows where white women say they state their cases. I'm not financially stable. I'm not mentally stable. I'm already having problems with my children. I'm already divorced, and this is what I believe in. But Blacks, you must have the child no matter what. If a woman says I'm not mentally fit, they're like, "Ukhuluma if I'm not financially stable, like we there will help you." Why, particularly on the Black community, more than any other race, it's placed on them that they must have children. It's a gift from God. I've seen people say it's a gift from God. And I saw a comment on one of your posts saying, I think sex gives babies, not God.
That was funny. Well, I do think there are a lot of white women who do experience the stigma as well. I think it cuts across race, but I will say that you're right. It's often more acceptable in certain cultures and certain spaces. But I also think it has to do with levels of empowerment. I always find that where people are much more marginalized and living much more in poverty, the pressure is more increased. Because what happens when you give women opportunities, when women are able to decide for themselves, they have buying power. Women make better decisions from themselves. It doesn't mean they're better. They're just more empowered. And for the longest time, Black women haven't been empowered to even an extent where we can't negotiate sex even in our own homes. You can't negotiate condom use even in our own homes. For the longest time, husbands are the ones who decide what happens, how it happens. I mean, there are women, I know black women who drink contraceptives and the husband doesn't know. And he just thinks it keeps not happening. But this poor woman is just trying to, not get pregnant. So I think a lot of black women are disempowered. And what we then do as a community is we take our position of being disempowered and use that as our culture or our way of being. And we don't elevate ourselves outside of that. And I think that's really sad. And that's why for me, even in my work in advocacy, it's to empower whatever information that I get, because other women empower me and I pay it forward. And I think the more we take women out of these marginalized positions, the more these kind of archaic, weird, what you just described is weird. You don't even know how to describe it, right? These types of weird beliefs, because also remember, black people were poor for a very long time. And a child became their way to maybe getting out of poverty, because your child might just go to school and your child most probably will go to university. That's why there's also so much pressure on us as this generation especially of young people, to achieve something and take our parents out of poverty. So a lot of people will even say things like, what if it's the new Mandela? What if it's the new... So a lot of hope was placed on children to take their family out of poverty, because also we fundamentally believe that our children have to take care of us. And this idea that why are you aborting? There you have someone who can take care of you. We haven't normalized finding other ways of community. You remember I said to you, we've lost our ways of community. I remember growing up and having a neighbor who, for the longest time, didn't have a child. And every time I would hear older women in the community talking about her, it would be so nasty. Oh, she doesn't even have a cat. Oh, what is she going to leave behind? Like, oh my gosh, what if she dies alone? Why should she die alone? She does not have friends. She does not have family. Why should it always be the children that are there for you? Like, there are no other ways. What if I can't have children? Like, what if I can't have children? So this whole emphasis on children being a silver bullet to life, being a certain way, is problematic. And I think that's why I'm saying various things. Then there's religion, like you said, people are like, it's a God-given gift and whatever. People will tell you about scriptures where God knew you before. God also knew when he was woving that I'll be gone. When I take mifepristone and I'm out. What are they saying on Twitter? Fetus deleter.
Yeah, fetus deleters.
So yeah, I think it's also because we're very spiritual people. We believe that people are spirits. That's why we believe in ancestors. So it's very difficult to reconcile that there's a clump of cells in there. We believe that clump of cells is a spirit and it's a person. So it's very hard when you're spiritually inclined to actually believe science and say, okay. Also, science has been mean to us for years as black people. So it's very hard to trust science. Look at what happened in COVID. It was during modern times, but people didn't trust science. And a lot of them were black people and were men. Men are the ones who don't trust science much more. So there's a lot of things that are happening. But I think for me, the one that makes me really sad is the fact that people are not being educated on what's true. Because, I mean, remember the views and beliefs, some still do have them, but there was a time where people didn't know much about HIV. And there was a widespread campaign to educate people. And I think as much as there is still stigma around HIV, it's way much better than in the olden days where, every time someone was sick, it would be like, he's got 3 rooms and garage. We hide it. People are now speaking out about, being HIV positive and living healthy lives, having children, getting married, that it's not a death trap and it's not a death sentence. But I feel like much more work needs to be done by government when it comes to abortion. They need to re-educate South Africa on the Choice of Terminating Act. It's a very beautiful act. It's so humanizing. And it talks about the empowerment of women making the choices around their own reproductive health. People also used to know, you need to know what used to happen to women before the Choice of Termination Act. And I think our government is not doing enough to make that education possible. Just a simple example. One of the things I never understand is I can go to a clinic and there's many posters about breastfeeding and don't, but there's nothing about abortion. Yeah, it's problematic. You see it in taxis, it's marketing. And you literally can put up marketing things everywhere about the Choice of Termination Act and some of what it says. But we are here and the revolution is here.
Well, I forgot a question I wanted to ask you. Do you think marriage makes better parental upbringing?
Yo, Mudimu, the most controversial one. I think I posted about it on my Facebook recently. And I said, I think it's so weird for me that in 2024, people still think like that. Like, I'm not saying that there are better institutional circumstances to being married. So marriage does have, it's society gives you certain benefits from being married, right? So maybe in your home, maybe at home you're more respected as the man, the woman, you are more slave or respected. It depends on, some people have come and said, I don't get treated like I am a slave. You know, I don't want to speak, I don't want to say everybody has that experience. But I think for me, children have simple, very simple, but yet can be difficult core needs, you know, and apart from eating, drinking, sleeping, the normal stuff that you have to provide for them, children need to know they are accepted. And no matter what your parenting situation is, married or unmarried, if you give your children the feeling of being accepted, that does so much for their psychological development. People need to know that children need to know that they are safe. One of the most important core emotional and psychological needs for children is safety. They need to be able to know and trust that the environment that they are in, they are safe. It's safe for them. And a lot of children, whether married or in unmarried homes, experience a lot of unsafety. And I think when we focus too much on be married, we forget the other needs that children need, that can be provided by any type of parent, you know. Children need to be given an environment where they can play and explore. That's very important for their environment. And I do not think marriage is the only space that provides that, you know, and other ones that I've mentioned. And yeah, children need to know that they're loved and they matter and they're important. I mean, this is besides every other thing that the obvious, the taking care of them and making sure they're fed and all of that. But I'm talking about the stuff that make them, you know, resilient, that make them, you know, go through life with confidence and all these other things. And I do not believe that those things can only be provided in a marriage. A lot of the times, children are actually unhappy in their homes where their parents are married because their parents put marriage above their own happiness and the happiness of their kids. And I think a lot of our mothers stayed in very unhappy marriages for us. And it's unfortunate. Yes, I do believe that good marriages are great, just like I believe that good relationships are great for children. But I think one of the things my son always says is that, you know, my friends at school are so spoiled. They have nice gadgets and stuff. But I'm spoiled in love, and I always feel so proud of myself and the people around my child who have provided him a place to be able to say he's spoiled in love, regardless of whether he has the latest gadgets or the latest shoe or not. He feels like his life is better off the way it is. We joke a lot about how when we are annoyed with each other, I'll be like, I'm going to sell you. It's like, no, I know you're joking, but no, I don't want. I'm like, what if I give you rich parents? Like, what if I give you to rich parents? It's like, no, I love my life as it is. And I think your children need to feel wholesome. And that's a lot of stuff that some of us lacked, even in with parents that were married. I mean, a lot of children have come out who are now adults to say, it's not what you think it is. It's not always great. It's not always good. Sometimes parents are actually not compatible, and it's just not working out. And some children grow up much healthier outside of that confinement, because it can be toxic as well.
Wow. We've lost track of time, hey? I want you to advise moms who have been diagnosed with a mental illness and they are scared to say it out because it will feel like they are invalidating the fact that they are a mother or the job is too heavy for them. And somebody who's feeling guilty because of an abortion they had. Yeah.
Must I look at the camera?
Yeah.
It's time. So I think for mothers who feel overwhelmed by motherhood, and maybe are suffering from mental illness, You don't owe that to the world. No, you don't have to be how and be on TikTok and talking about it per se, but you owe it to yourself, to admit it to yourself that I'm struggling here, and maybe I need help from whoever or whatever. You owe it to yourself to be honest about your struggles, and look around your immediate sphere of influence who can be your supportive system. There is nothing wrong with getting help. I don't know why, as mothers, we are so obsessed with doing it ourselves. There's no trophy for that thing. Our children love us regardless. One of the things my kids have taught me is that they love me. Even on the days that I cannot take care of them, they love me. I was admitted in hospital for 21 days in 2022, and I couldn't be there for my kids for that 21 days. And I felt so guilty that I'm mentally not okay. I came back to a very warm home. I came back to hugs and kisses and laughs. And my children were just so happy to have me home. And that reminded me that it's okay to prioritize yourself when you need to. On abortion, and feeling guilty about having an abortion. Firstly, that feeling is justified. Don't invalidate yourself. Don't gaslight yourself. We live in a society that makes you feel guilty for what you've done. We live in a society that makes it a point to say what you've done is wrong. So those emotions are valid, but you do not have to trap yourself in those feelings and not let your life move on because society says abortion is wrong. You know what you did. You know how it has improved your life. You know that it has made your life even much better because you were not ready for a child or you do not want that specific pregnancy at the time. So I think it's okay to let go of the guilt and not allow it to hold on to you, and grip you because it's unfair on you. It's not something that you should carry your entire life. I'm one of those people who's like, having abortions was the best decision I ever made in my life. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Wow, last but not least, you speak to people who have met Medusa,
Who's that?
sexual survivors. Medusa is the
Oh,
title of the
yes.
the rape victims usually put on. Yeah.
I wasn't prepared for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's life.
I think one of the things I always say to people who've experienced sexual violence, and we don't say it enough, it was not your fault. It will never be your fault. And I think one of the things we do the most is we blame ourselves. There's something wrong in our society, and that has nothing to do with you. It's not about what you wore, where you went, how you spoke to this person, how you didn't speak to this person. It really has nothing to do with you. And that's what I want to leave you with.
No. Yo, thanks, Khao.
Thank you.
That was a loaded conversation, hey?
I know. Thank you for platforming.
Thank you.
You're also doing the work.
Thank you
by
so much.
platforming these conversations.
Yes, because where would we learn all this?
Exactly.
Yeah. There you have it, viewers. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to Khao for sharing her knowledge and also her expertise, I would say. If you want to follow her, Instagram, Facebook.
Yes.
Yes, I
So
know.
I'm
She's
on.
feminist.
Yeah, I'm Mommy Feminist Mommy Feminist or Feminist Mommy, you'll find me.
Okay. We'll put her details during editing and you will DM her if you need knowledge on abortion activism and the work that she does. Khao, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Viewers, I'll see you next week. I'd like to thank my Family Sense Studios for hosting us. I love you long time. See you next week.